college football playoff rankings just got dropped in our lap. And it affirmed some things that I thought I knew, and it's just confounded me on some other things. I know a lot of you want to talk about Miami and Notre Dame, and I'm going to in a second. I promised to unload on that the other night. Many of you called me on the fact that I just completely forgot to, because I did completely forget to. I'm not going to forget tonight. But first things first, Bama and Notre Dame flip spots. Some people were surprised by that. I wasn't. Frankly, I thought Alabama belonged above Notre Dame the entire time, but that's irrelevant because the past is the past. If you follow the odds market on this sort of thing, it became pretty obvious throughout last night and today someone knew something. Don't even begin to ask me how. When I'm college football playoff commissioner, the leaks will stop. But I'm not. And so the information was apparently flowing, and the odds market got a hold of it. Alabama's 9, Notre Dame is 10, which brings me to the point that I made Sunday night. This was never going to be an Alabama-Brigham Young deal. Like if Alabama loses the SEC championship game Saturday, I never thought it was going to be an either-or Alabama or Brigham Young being in. I thought it was always going to be Notre Dame or Brigham Young. Now, I mentioned Alabama losing the SEC championship game. What we really need to focus on is what happens if BYU wins the Big 12 title game. That's what we really got to hone in on right here. Because there was a thought when Alabama was 10th and Notre Dame was 9th that, could Alabama fall out of that thing? Could Brigham Young jump Alabama? No, they're going to jump Notre Dame, which is the way it should be, by the way. Notre Dame's got a lot of benefit for existing the way they do, and I've never pushed back on it. You have never heard me go on this show and say Notre Dame needs to join a conference. I probably never will say it. I don't believe that. I actually fully respect Notre Dame's independence. If I was a college football program, and I am, Pate State Freights, we're undefeated on the year, we're independent, we're not joining a conference. The rest of you needed to survive. We didn't. So I got no problem with Notre Dame's independence. However, it does not come without risk. And the risk is this moment right here. You may finally see Notre Dame get penalized for sitting at home on Conference Championship Saturday. If that's the way it happens, that's the way it happens. There's not this protective orb around South Bend, Indiana, that prevents them from the shrapnel of college football playoff selection season. I mean, they could get cut in the neck the same as the rest of us. So it was never going to be Alabama and Notre Dame or Alabama Brigham Young. It was going to be Notre Dame or Brigham Young. Now, the discussion points, as much as I do agree with Alabama being bumped above Notre Dame, are insane. Here's the only thing you need to say. All right, I need to step in. I need to intercede for Hunter Yurachek. That became obvious in the Arkansas coaching search, but it's especially obvious now. Just say the committee decided to put Alabama above Notre Dame. Just say that. I don't care if it leaves dead air and Reese Davis is left looking at you saying, is he okay? Someone check on him. I don't care, because that would be better. Pregnant pauses and outright dead air would be better than me listening to you tell me Alabama elevated because they were at one point up 17-0 on Auburn. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse. They also ended up being tied with Auburn in that same game. It was a rivalry game, which apparently is a data point now. Also, Alabama ran the ball better. These are actual phrases that came out of his mouth when it came to explaining why Alabama elevated. Dude, just shut up. Just say they elevated because we decided they need to elevate. That may leave a little mystery or maybe a little suspense, but Meemaw had an age-old saying about being foolish and opening your mouth and removing all doubt. Don't open your mouth. Just don't open the mouth. Okay, now, as for this whole Notre Dame-Miami thing, take a deep breath. It's been 30 minutes. I tried to cool down. I can't cool down on it. The way Notre Dame and Miami are being discussed together is a joke. Notre Dame being ranked ahead of Miami is a joke. A lot of the conversation piece around why Notre Dame is ranked above Miami continues to be a joke to me. They were once again ranked ahead of Miami tonight. There is a thought in the room that now that's set. Now, if you were watching the playoff rankings reveal show, they brought Hunter Yurachek on, and he fumbled his way through admitting, no, that doesn't mean they're set. Idle teams can still move after Conference Championship Saturday, but even then, he said they could. He didn't say they would. So how in the world could Miami still be in this? There is a way. I don't think Miami's fully cooked yet. And here's how it would happen. Miami should be the biggest fan of Duke football in the history of mankind right now. Follow me here for a second. There is a world where Brigham Young loses. Okay, so they're out of the way. And then it's just Miami and Notre Dame next to each other. Imagine Duke winning the ACC championship game. They are currently about a field goal or a 2.5-point dog. So it's very conceivable. If Duke wins the ACC championship game, the aforementioned ACC doomsday scenario goes into effect. And that is, Duke's not going to make the playoff because they won't be one of the 5 highest-ranked conference champs. And so the committee would be left sitting there having already had the Notre Dame-Miami debate in front of them to begin with, which is egregious on the surface that Miami doesn't already get the nod over Notre Dame. Not only will they have that, they'll also have this added sledgehammer to their face at the 11th hour of the idea that we either put Miami in or there will be no representation from an entire Power 4 conference. And as much as you may be sitting there thinking, oh, well, tough luck, that's not why this thing was built. This thing was not built to vault 2 G5 teams into a 12-team playoff. It wasn't built for that. And so, imagine Selection Sunday. Brigham Young loses, they're out of the way. It is Notre Dame, Miami, boom, smack dab next to each other, and Duke has won the ACC championship game. So you're having the Notre Dame-Miami debate again, and you have the added benefit of knowing if we don't put Miami in, there is no ACC team in. That's a nightmare. Or what you could do is you could just look at it and say, like you did with Alabama Notre Dame tonight, we had the wrong team above another team all along because we have continued to beat our heads against the door when it comes to Notre Dame, Miami. I don't need you to question my intelligence on this. I don't need you to throw data points in my face. I've seen all the arguments. I've heard the Notre Dame case articulated. It's wrong. It's wrong. And here's how I know it's wrong. Because I watched the 2 teams play on a football field. Okay? So this is a blanket policy that could apply to anyone. If I've got a head-to-head result, if the resumes are even remotely comparable, the head-to-head result's going to carry the day. I'll tell you why. Because this is competitive sport. It is merit-based competitive sport. I don't need you coming to me saying, oh, well, the head-to-head does matter. It's just not the only thing that matters. It better be times 10 mattering over everything else, or else I don't really know why we're playing the games. Okay? So you're either going to come to me and say Notre Dame's resume is unequivocally head and shoulders better than Miami, which it's not, or I'm going to look you in the eye and say, great, cool, you found fractions of inches on that little piece of paper. I found 4.5 hours of game tape, if you want to watch the broadcast copy, that shows you Miami beating Notre Dame. You know, Josh, that was a long time ago. Yeah. Unless you tell me we've got preseason games in college football now, as far as I can tell, it's a regular season game. There is an L right there, right before the next L that Notre Dame toted. So, got all the respect in the world for Notre Dame. It would be great for my business if Notre Dame were in the playoff. But it's not made for TV. It's not a production. It's competitive sport. I know in reality it is made for TV. But if you really care about the purity and the sanctity, we still use those words around here, of college football and the integrity of the bracket, Miami ought to have been ahead of Notre Dame already. And if it comes time on Selection Sunday for that committee to decide whether they're going to vault Miami over Notre Dame, especially if Duke wins the ACC, or have no ACC representation, I still think they may put Miami in over Notre Dame. Let's talk about Alabama for a second. Quick 5-second timeout. Check and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It keeps it free. We love you. All right, back to the show. Alabama's going to be in the playoff. There's a lot of debate about this right now, and I think it's pretty foolish. The question tonight was sort of answered about whether Alabama would jump Notre Dame or not. Like if there's one team that's got to fall out if Brigham Young wins the Big 12, is it going to be Alabama if they lose in the SEC title game, or is it going to be Notre Dame? It's going to be Notre Dame. I can answer that question for you. I think the committee answered that question for you tonight. But the other question around Alabama is, well, okay, if they're not going to fall out of the playoff if they lose, which they're not going to, well, how high could they jump if they win? I heard another scenario floated out there tonight that, boy, if Alabama wins the SEC championship game, look what that opens the door for. That opens the door for 3 Big Ten teams to get buys. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. All that's going to happen is Alabama's going to take one of those top 4 spots, as they should. I don't even have a problem with it. You need to understand what's in play here. All right, the SEC championship game and the Big Ten championship game, those 2 things matter more than any other properties in the room outside of the playoff itself. Now, we're going to talk adult talk here, so if we got any children, You just need to earmuff it for a second because this may not make you feel good, but I'm just going to tell you the way it is. The SEC and the Big Ten are better than the rest of college football. Everyone knows it. To suggest otherwise is just to pretend or live in some fantasy world. They've got a ton invested in their conference championship games. Therefore, inclusion in those games, participation in those games, whether you win it or lose it, has to carry maximum significance, or else you erode very quickly the credibility and integrity and value of those games, and people stop caring, and teams stop wanting to play in them. You've already got a little bit of that going on now, but I want you to imagine what would happen to exclamate that, to amplify that, if an Alabama lost Saturday and got bumped out, or if they won the conference championship Saturday but only got bumped up to 5, so you put an at-large team ahead of them from another conference. It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen that way. But the other thing to consider in the Big Ten is that's also why Ohio State and Indiana both know, regardless of the outcome Saturday, they're going to be in the top 4. Why? Because they're playing in the conference championship game in the Big Ten. That's why. So it really doesn't matter. What matters is the order of seeding. Whoever wins that game will be number 1. Whoever loses, it probably doesn't drop below 2. But I can virtually assure you, if Alabama wins Saturday, they're jumping into that top 4. Some guy came at me and Bud Elliott earlier today, of all people. Came at me and Bud Elliott, wanted to bet us $1,000 American on this. And look, we wanted to go for more than $1K. When there's free money on the table, kids, you got to take it. Very rarely are those sorts of propositions offered to you in life. We have thus far gotten no response from that gentleman. Texas and Vandy don't appear to have a path. A lot of thoughts about this. Feel really bad for Vanderbilt. I don't know what would have happened tonight to give them a path. I just don't know what the scenario would have been. And look, Texas jumped up a few spots. That's really been one of the talking points that's past tense of ground my gears a little bit. Because it kind of goes back to the same thing we're talking about with Notre Dame, the eye test. The eye test. Kublik pressed me on this on his own radio show early this morning. We were talking about Miami, Notre Dame. He said, who do you think's better? Who would you pick if they played right now, Miami or Notre Dame? I pick Notre Dame. I don't care who I'd pick. I don't care who I think the better team is. Just like with Texas. Do I think there are 12 teams in the country better than Texas? Of course I don't. Who do I think would give Ohio State a better run for their money? Texas or Brigham Young? Well, of course I think Texas could, potentially, because they do have the personnel where they could do that. That's not how this works. You don't get power rated into the playoff. You earn your way into the playoff. Texas hasn't earned their way into the playoff. And it would be another thing if you had scheduled up, which they did, and challenged Ohio State in week 1, which they did, and lost a couple of more really competitive games, but dominated elsewhere. They didn't. They lost to a really bad Florida team. Look, you don't need to sell me on how tough it is to play in the swamp. And when Florida's clicking earlier in the season and they've got all those athletes all over the place, they were way better than their final record indicated. I know that. I picked them to beat you that day. I expected them to play at that level. I'm not holding you to a pretty good standard. If you're Texas and you're trying to make the playoff, you got to meet a higher bar than that. And you didn't. And you really messed around on the road against Kentucky, and you messed around on the road against Mississippi State. I'd love to paint the path. I'd love to pave the path for Texas to get in. It's not there. You didn't earn your way in. The body of work's not there. And trust me, anyone who watches this show, anyone familiar with the model knows if there was a show out there that was going to paint a path for Texas to get in this thing, I'd do it. It's just not there. It is just not there. That win at the end against A&M gave them a fighting chance, but you needed other dominoes to fall, and they just didn't. So it's not there. The G5, the American champ, I think is a lock at this point, I would say, to get in. But, man, the difference in the 6 or the 7 seed right now, if you just take a look at the way the bracket sets up, A&M, for instance, A&M's 7th right now. Ole Miss jumped. And hats off to the committee, by the way, apparently saying we could not care less that our own protocol allows us to drop Ole Miss because their coaches left. We're not going to do that. I assume that's what they mean if they vault Ole Miss up one spot. So look at the difference in 6 and 7 as it relates to projected first-round matchups. So you may think to yourself, oh, who cares? 6 7, doesn't matter. We'll get a first-round home playoff game either way. Yeah, well, it's the difference in the 6 seed playing an ACC team or a G5 team versus the 7 seed playing Notre Dame right now. There are 3 touchdowns worth of a difference in point spread of you playing one versus you playing the other. So you got that 6 seed, you will face tougher competition in your practices during the week than you would on that game day versus being the 7 seed. Speaking of hypotheticals, FanDuel has hit us up, and they have let us know what these hypotheticals would be. And this is just going off the way the bracket is set up right now. So if Alabama played at Oklahoma right now, Bama is a 1.5-point favorite in Norman. Notre Dame at Texas A&M would be a pick'em. And then we got a combination of potential matchups here. So James Madison at Oregon would be Oregon minus 18.5. Oregon would be favored by 19.5 against North Texas. Oregon by 24.5 against Tulane. And then we got a few of them with Ole Miss too. Virginia at Ole Miss minus 13.5. North Texas at Ole Miss minus 13. Tulane at Ole Miss minus 18. I know everyone's going to have thoughts on especially the Alabama part, the Notre Dame Miami part, and the dumbest part about all this is like there are obviously no sure things here. But everyone who appears to be making their case in the Miami or the Notre Dame side of things continues to like beat a gavel on the table. This is not even debatable. It's not even remotely close. And I especially don't understand that argument from the Notre Dame side of things. My entire reason for advocating Miami being above Notre Dame is because I think it is close. And there's like this certain bubble where if we get inside the bubble, that means the two data points there in the cluster are at least comparable. And if they're comparable, you need to ask only one other question. Do we have a head-to-head result between these two dots here? We do. Or whichever dot won, that's the one that goes above the dot that lost. That's it. That's how this really should work. Of course, things can't be that simple in college football.